Candyland is an American institution. I'm not sure, but this diabetic-inducing race to King Candy's castle might be my very first experience with a board game. It's at least the first in which that's left a memorable experience. Whether it's its intoxicating art or dopamine-inducing jaunts down Peppermint Pass, this game has been delighting folks since 1949, and with 40 million copies sold, it's probably one of the best games of all time, right? Wrong. Definitely not. According to BGG, it has a 3.2 rating. Its overall rank is 25,349. And surprisingly, its kids game rank is 1,038. It can't even crack the top 500 in children's games, which is pretty impressive feat for something that's sold 40 million copies. And enter into the picture Heat. With significantly less calories and beefed up mechanics, Heat looks to take what Candyland introduced and make it so much more. So you might be asking, what on earth does Heat have to do with Candyland? And that's honestly exactly what I was asking last night when my son started playing this game and in the first couple of turns said, "This is just like Candyland." I immediately scoffed and was absolutely offended that he compared my brand new, highly strategic racing game to Candyland. And I kind of brushed it off and I thought, you know, he just doesn't feel like playing a family game right now, and that is okay. But after tossing and turning all night long, thinking about it, I came to the conclusion this morning that Heat is Candyland, but better. And stay with me here. I'm going to break down exactly what Heat borrowed from Candyland and how exactly it made it better. And if you stay to the end, I will give you the one area that I think Candyland is actually better than Heat. And without further ado, let's get into it. The first and probably the most obvious way these two games act alike is simply how you win. With Candyland, you have to get to King Candy's castle. The moment you do, the game is over and you win. We all know this. With Heat, it's similar. You complete a certain number of laps around the track. It's variable depending on the track and setup that you're working with. However, when the first person goes across the finish line, the game has not ended. Everyone else gets to finish their turn, and the person that is extended past the finish line more than everyone else actually wins the game. So everybody gets an even number of turns. You might not have realized it when you were a kid, but if you went first in Candyland, you have a significant advantage. Many other games mitigate this with extra resources or better setups or cards or whatever it may be, but Candyland screwed us. They did not do that. They didn't care. Life is not fair. If you just happen to go first, you very much might win that game. The second, and I'll give it another pretty obvious one, is they have a map and or racetrack that you are trying to navigate to win the game. With Candyland, there's very little variability here. There's a Peppermint Pass and a gummy shortcut that gives you a little bit of variability on that map, but it's the same every time. Heat brings it with 4 different maps, variable setups, weather tiles, road condition tiles that do all kinds of different things. So once you really get into this game, there's plenty of variety in regards to the map to go around on this. You're not going to be plagued playing the same old Candyland map each and every time. All right, so now we're starting to get into the nitty gritty. Those first were pretty loose comparisons here, but now we're going to get into my number 3, which is they have a really similar action mechanism. You draw a card, play card, do what the card says. Now, there are some differences. Candyland, you're grabbing a card and going to the next color along the road. You don't have a hand of cards. You don't have your own deck. So there's very little in the way of strategy and luck mitigation. But in Heat, you have a deck with a variable number of cards, and what it does to improve on that very simple draw a card, play a card, is it allows you to draw 7 cards, and then you can play a variable number of those cards based upon the shifting mechanic, which is actually pretty ingenious. There's 4 different levels on the shifter. You start with 1. You can move up and down 1 for free each turn, or you can move up or down 2 spaces if you spend a heat, which we'll get to in a second. But it's an ingenious way, combined with some other mechanics in the game, to give you some agency as a player to play more cards and feel more powerful, with some very major drawbacks. So going up and down that shifter becomes incredibly important. This mechanic is cleverly balanced with the heat mechanic, which allows you to clog up your deck with these pesky heat cards for a benefit, of course. However, there is definitely a drawback as you have to redraw these cards, and now you don't have the cards to play to move you around the track. And that combined with the corner speed limit mechanic really turns this into a heavy puzzle and differentiates itself from Candyland in a really big way. And number 4, both games have special cards that give you abilities. With Candyland, when you draw the picture card, you get to go to that space. That could be a huge boon, help you jump ahead of all the other players. If you draw it at the wrong time and that symbol is actually behind you, you get to go backwards. So it definitely comes with a cost. Similarly, Heat has upgrade cards. Those upgrade cards do a lot of different things, like brakes, for example, give you a variable amount of movement. However, you have to take some heat. It's that trade-off. Or tires, for example, where you get 3 cooldown. It's a 2 movement card. However, the speed going into the corner is -1. So there's that cost benefit there. And yeah, they act sort of similar. On top of that, the base game comes with a 5 movement card. Downfall to that is during the stress resolution. If you were to draw that card, you don't get to use that 5 because it doesn't have the proper symbol and it's discarded and you have to wait for it to come around. Also in that setup, there's the 0 and a heat card that start in your deck as well. Once again, the downside to those specialty cards. And for number 5, they even both have mechanics to slow you down. With Candyland, it's those pesky licorice spaces. If you land on one of those, you are screwed. You don't get a next turn. With Heat, it's a little bit different, a little more strategic, and this is certainly an improvement. It's the corner speed limit mechanism that kind of plagues you all around the track and stops you from playing 4 cards each time, because if you go around that corner too fast, you're going to have to pay the difference in heat. And we just talked about heat clogs up that deck. It's going to clog up your hand and it's going to hurt you. Also, if you can't pay that difference in heat, you spin out and you go back and you're stuck behind that corner line, a lot like that licorice space. Both of these mechanics are what create friction and suspense in the game. In Candyland, if you're getting close to that licorice space, before you draw that card, you're really hoping that it doesn't come up the right color to put you on that spot and lose your turn. You have a little bit of a hold your breath moment as you draw that card. At the same time with Heat, as you're coming up on a corner, you're doing the math to try to get around that corner. And if for whatever reason you have to play a stress card, and then when you resolve that card, your speed just goes too fast and you go around the corner. And then if you don't have the heat to pay, you spin out and you got to go back. And that's repeating 3 or 4 times around the map, depending on the map that you're on, constantly creating this strategic friction as you go around. You're constantly doing the arithmetic on the spaces and weigh in your options. And then if you're near the end of the race, do I have enough heat to blow through that corner and sprint to the finish line? No holds bars, because I'm not going to draw those heat again. It doesn't matter that they go into the deck. It creates this really great suspense as you play the game. Sort of similar to Candyland when you're coming up on those licorice spaces. This confluence of strategic card play, the shift system, the push your luck elements with the stress cards, the cost benefit analysis that you're constantly doing with the heat card system is what has made Heat a significantly better game than Candyland. And the ratings show on BGG, it's 8.1 as opposed to the 3.2 in Candyland. This improvement on the Candyland system has earned it nearly 24,000 plus spots on the overall ranking. Heat is currently sitting at number 57, and it's the number 7 overall family game. I think it's safe to say that Heat improves on nearly every aspect of Candyland, but there's one that I teased before that I still prefer, and it's the theme. This cavity-inducing fantasy land is one in which I would choose to visit every time over what is kind of the bland maps of Heat. I don't know, call me crazy. And on that note, thanks for watching. I'm out of here.